Up next on Borealis. A small fish with a mighty impact. We explore the comeback of alewives. Murray Carpenter takes us to the Western Maine mountains to meet some anglers who break the mold. And starting them young, middle schoolers become citizen scientists in Acadia National Park. Stay with us.
Production support for Borealis is provided by
the Nature Conservancy in Maine, joining science, action, and innovative partners to help connect communities and address the global climate crisis. From our forests to our rivers to the Gulf of Maine, learn more at nature.org/join Maine.
At Poland Spring, we've called Maine home since 1845 and are proud to be part of the community. Over the past 2 decades, investing more than $12 million in the place that we call home. Poland Spring, 100% natural spring water.
And by viewers like you. Thank you.
You guys ready to hike?
In the wilderness, you darling. I wanna get lost in the rivers and the woods. Get you up on the mountainside, and we can just climb.
Hello, I'm Aislinn Sarnacki, and this is the very first episode of Borealis. Thank you for joining us. Over the next few weeks, we're going to bring you all over Maine to some pretty remote locations. But believe it or not, as we stand here among these tall trees with this bubbling brook in Millbrook Preserve, we're in the middle of Westbrook in an urban oasis where people walk their dogs and go jogging, and once a year, they get to witness something pretty remarkable.
Like clockwork, Westbrook's peaceful Millbrook Preserve is interrupted every spring by one of Mother Nature's great spectacles.
You can see it up close and in person here. Individual fish jumping. You can see an individual make its way up to the climb and then either make it or not make it. So there's that natural drama that plays out several times a minute as you're here, which makes it a really popular spot for people to come and observe.
It's an amazing moment in nature that you can see from a riverbank, which is rare. You don't have to be on Blue Planet to see something like this.
The main character of this drama is a small fish called the alewife. Alewives are anadromous, meaning they spend most of their life in the ocean but spawn in fresh water. After 4 or 5 years in the Gulf of Maine, these alewives now swim 11 miles upstream to spawn in Highland Lake, returning to where they were born.
So I would think about alewives as the most important fish in the sea, the river, and the lake.
Zach Whitener studies alewives at the Gulf of Maine Research Institute. He says they're critical to the food chain and have been eaten by all kinds of animals, and humans too, for millennia.
Alewives have been incredibly important to both ecosystems and to humans in this area since the last ice age. We can't even begin to think about how many fish there used to be in all of these rivers. When you read historical documents about the river being black with fish, it's hard to imagine that being true. It sounds like hyperbole, but if there's alewives running, you can't see the bottom of that little brook because there's so many fish in it.
Seeing the alewives here in Millbrook again is a precious thing to Zach and other conservationists. For a long time, their population was in trouble, decimated by dams built by early colonists and others.
There was a precipitous drop-off in alewife numbers for the last few hundred years, and things got really bad probably in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, with habitat being much reduced and overfishing occurring.
Awareness of the impact that dams and mills were having on alewives and other anadromous fish like herring and salmon did not catch on until the early 21st century, when the removal of many key dams allowed for these resilient fish to return. With the help of scientists and conservationists, these fish slowly began to show up in rivers and streams that hadn't seen an alewife in more than 2 centuries.
Their populations have really grown in the last few years. Before the restoration projects and dam removals within the last 10 years, the run on the Penobscot River was estimated to be a couple thousand fish. As of last week, they recently passed 3 million fish. And so they've really responded to the opening up of habitats.
Now visitors to this southern Maine preserve can watch the action unfold, just as the original people living on this land did for hundreds of generations. 60 miles away, it's a whole different scene. As millions of alewives headed to Damascotta Lake make their way up a man-made fish ladder.
It's a 42-foot rise, I think, up to the lake. And so there's 69 pools or thereabouts. And they're divided up so that each pool has an 8 to 10 inch drop or rise up into the next pool up. And that is the most efficient measurement for alewives to go from one pool to the next.
This fish ladder has been in place here since the early 1800s, built originally to help alewives bypass an early sawmill.
We organized a neighborhood group here in Damascotta Mills.
Deb Wilson and her husband Mark are the stewards of this fish ladder now. Since 2006, they've been steering efforts to restore it with the help of community here.
And what you're looking at behind me now is the first third. This part was done first because it was accessible by road, and we had to figure out how to get to the rest of it.
The entire restoration took 10 years to complete and was funded by a combination of festivals and grants totaling $1 million, along with plenty of sweat equity.
So that's what we did, one pool after another, all the way down, 69 pools. It was quite an enterprise, but right now it's working in an amazing way. And going from, say, 80,000 fish back in 2007, we're up to getting over 1 million every single year up into Damascotta Lake to spawn. So a pretty exciting change.
The migration here is now one of the biggest in the state. It's so successful that now trucks line up twice a day during migration to harvest alewives. They're sold as lobster bait to local fishermen, making it a key component of the economy here.
They're pretty important. I think that having a local source of bait is a good thing, and it's traditional too. A lot of the guys who come to get bait here have been doing it for 25 years. They may have come with their fathers before that, and it's almost like a rite of spring as well.
With strict rules surrounding the harvest, Mark believes that this alewife run will remain successful into the future.
If we're having a good day, we may get a couple hundred bushels in the course of the day. The numbers in terms of what we're harvesting have been steadily going up compared to what they were before the fish ladder restoration happened. Our goal is to harvest as many fish as we can, but only harvest those fish that we can sell.
Every spring, as the alewives make their way up to the Damascotta River, the ospreys and eagles arrive, lining the banks. Along with tourists from all over the world. Armed with cameras, they're here for the feeding frenzy that only lasts a few weeks.
Wherever the wildlife is, that's where I try to go.
Stephen Chu is a photographer from New Jersey who made the trip to capture the excitement.
If there's action, the photographers will come. So, once one person knows, he tells his friend, and he tells his friend, and then it becomes a crowd.
The story of the humble alewife is still being told, and their future is far from certain, as many of New England's rivers and streams still have dams and impediments that limit the ancient migration patterns of these fish. But with the tireless efforts of scientists, naturalists, and concerned citizens, the future holds promise for this intrepid little fish and all of the species of animals who depend on them to survive.
The dark days of the early 90s, I hope and think those are past us now. There's a lot more interest at every level in dam removals and improvement in fish passage when dams can't be removed. I think that there's a lot of work that's been going on to make sure that these fish are properly managed, both in the rivers and in the ocean. And I think that we're only going to see more alewives going forward. So alewives, I think, are poised for a resurgence for decades to come.
To learn more about the Damascotta Mills Fish Ladder and the Millbrook Preserve, head on over to our YouTube channel. For our next story, we're headed deep into the mountains of Western Maine. Reporter Murray Carpenter will be introducing us to a group of anglers who are working to share the joys of fly fishing with more people.
On a sunny June morning, Fishing guide Jared Willett walks into an eddy on the Wild River, reaches down under the cold water, and pulls up a round rock.
So there's a really tiny mayfly nymph on this guy, writhing around in the water there.
Wow, how did
Teeny,
you
teeny,
see
tiny.
that?
He's revealing one of the many tricks he's picked up through years of fly fishing, flipping rocks.
Flipping rocks is like just kind of a good place to start when you get to like a new stretch of water. Trout mainly feed on insects, and a lot of those are like nymphal stages of things called mayflies or caddisflies or stoneflies, and they kind of just hang out and cling to the bottom of rocks. So it's a really good way to just get a feel of, what sort of insect life is in the stretch of river.
It's a classic scene on a Western Maine river, an experienced guide sharing the secrets and magic of fly fishing with enthusiastic anglers.
Pretty.
So this up here is elk hair, and it's got lots of like hollow cavities on the inside of it, so it's really, really buoyant.
But this gathering's anything but typical. The participants have signed up for a special weekend called Outcast Camp, put on by a new organization, the Confluence Collective.
Thank you all so much for being so open with one another. So excited that you're here.
Jacque Lewis came from Staten Island for her second Confluence Collective retreat. She says the organization's helping to diversify the sport of fly fishing for women, people who are LGBTQ, and people of color.
You open up a magazine or you go online or, you're looking for gear and the person fly fishing isn't going to look like me, right? And so to the layperson, that might give you the impression that, this isn't something that is accessible to me, but it is.
Maine is known for its diversity of fly fishing opportunities. There's wild brook trout in high cold streams like this one, and smallmouth bass in the big rivers, and stripers down along the coast. But it's not been known for diversity among anglers themselves.
So if you're not able to see your fly on the water, don't strain too much. Try a parachute.
Bree Dostie has been fishing since she was 6 and fly fishing since she was 15. She founded the Confluence Collective in 2019.
The Confluence started as a way to define a more inclusive and expansive and dynamic culture that would work for the full diversity of anglers that exists that we don't see as much on the water.
So I think that we have to kind of change our perspective and change the imagery around these activities that we enjoy. And the Confluence Collective provides just that, an opportunity to see and interact and to learn from people that don't appear to be your typical fly fishing enthusiasts, but are just as knowledgeable and, welcoming and astute as anyone else. As the old pros, perhaps.
Many of the participants are new to fly fishing, others more experienced. Lauren Murdoch has been fly fishing for years, but she says this weekend feels different.
I actually have never fished with anyone but men before, so this is a really awesome experience.
As Jacque and Lauren cast for trout on the Wild River, another group of anglers travels to the Magalloway River in far northwestern Maine. Native brook trout and landlocked salmon are rising, eating flies from the surface of the river. Guide Megan Hess and 3 Outcast Camp anglers spent the morning on the river. The fish were very picky, but by lunchtime, everyone in the group had caught a fish, except Bev Pigeon. Then a feisty landlocked salmon smashed her fly.
Good job!
Yeah, it was like rising here again and again and again and again.
That was fighting hard. That fish was healthy. What a beautiful fish. All right.
Dostie says this is what it's all about, the way that rivers and fish can bring people together.
Oh, that was just beautiful.
Woo! I found some of my most beautiful relationships in my life on the water. It's fueled my creative practice. It has brought me together with people that'll be a part of my life forever. And I found myself out here in ways that I couldn't possibly imagine outside of being in nature. Wouldn't allow myself the space and the grace and the humility in order to really know myself. So I feel like it's just something that every person should have the opportunity to explore for themselves.
Outcast Camp isn't just about fly fishing. There's also fly tying, good food, and campfires. But in the end, it's not about those either.
Catching a fish is great, right? Tying flies is great, but just enjoying the environment, I think, is something that we have access to as fly fishers that like no one else does. You know, I find a lot of calm and peace and enjoyment in nature, and this is just another way for me to access that. I could be hunting, I could be doing other types of fishing, I could be going for a hike, but I'm fly fishing, and there's a lot of joy in that.
And in this way, a whole new and different breed of fly anglers are emerging from the waters of Maine. For Borealis, I'm Murray Carpenter.
The Confluence Collective also hosts outcast camps in Wisconsin and Montana. There's a concern that kids are spending just a little bit too much time on the screen and not enough time outside. But there's people all over Maine working to fix that. One of the longest running programs is right on the Schoodic Peninsula, and I got to join the kids for a few days.
Morning everyone, how are you doing? Excellent. All right, so got a lot of great stuff planned for you.
We have Bar Harbor just moving into camp. They'll be with us for 3 days, and they're really excited.
These kids are ready for a big adventure. They're taking part in the long-running Schoodic Education Adventure, or SEA. Over the next 3 days, they'll become scientists and explorers as they learn about this landscape and ocean, hands-on. Kate Petrie, the education coordinator for the park, has been leading the program for 25 years. I ask her, what makes learning at sea different from learning in the classroom?
The outdoor classroom, the ability to connect with it, the chance to get kids outside, back to the real basics, not a book or electronics, but the real basics of what makes up the earth around them, and help them to reconnect with the wonderment that they had as little kids.
That's a good question.
These kids are all from 6th grade, but there are SEA programs for 5th through 8th grade, with a variety of lessons and activities for teachers to choose from to fit their curriculum.
And then they're also slowing down.
After the picnic lunch, the students break into groups to hike one of the park's trails and learn about geology along the way.
So we're looking at this rock. How does it look different from this one that we're sitting on? Different colors, yeah.
Amanda Pollock, the public affairs officer for Acadia, says that SEA allows students to dip their toes in conservation and understand why it's important.
This program is a perfect example of exactly what the National Park Service is looking to do at all levels. The National Park Service's mission is to preserve and protect these landscapes for future generations, and hopefully inspire those future generations to want to continue with this mission and continue to help us take care of these national parks.
Also on the first day, students learn about navigation using a giant map of Maine and GPS devices.
Some of you are going to go off the map. 30 kilometers.
Alexa Pisano, the director of SEA, teaches the Map and Compass course. She's also in charge of keeping everything in the program running smoothly.
It's an incredible place and incredible program, and I think myself and all of my staff recognize that on a regular basis.
The instructors are park rangers, outdoor educators, and volunteers with expertise in certain subjects. Middle school science teacher Brian Cody has been bringing his students for many years.
I think the biggest thing they get away out of this program is a sleepover camp. Most of these kids have never done it, so to come and spend some time away from mom and dad and be with their peers, it's a big deal. It's really exciting for most kids. One thing I get a lot of is like on the way home, they're like, Mr. Cody, can we go back there for our 8th grade class trip? And I'm like, no, but obviously you had a lot of fun.
After dinner, the middle schoolers end their day with outdoor games about the amazing abilities of owls and other night creatures.
That's amazing. Now I'd like you to try taking your deer ears away.
I hear different. Yeah, no, you can hear the ocean so much more.
Leaders for our trip today. We are heading down into the tide pools this morning. We're going to do some citizen science. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Students rise bright and early the next morning to catch low tide.
Photographer, crab handler. So you all are going to be collecting real data that goes to the study on green crabs.
The data that the students collect will go to the Gulf of Maine Research Institute, where research is being done to track green crab populations. In recent years, green crab numbers have skyrocketed in certain areas, throwing coastal ecosystems out of balance and threatening the shellfish industry.
To do, because if they're invasive, they're just going to be more invasive. So like we can't really do anything, like you said, because it's a national park. So like, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what you guys can do is actually record this data. So this data actually goes to real scientists to kind of look at seeing how many green crabs there are in one area. All right, do you guys have your iPad?
Yep.
Quadrat?
Yep.
Someone has the journal page?
Yep.
Someone has the bucket?
Yep.
Woo! It is a different thing if you've never walked on seaweed before. Very slippery. It's like walking on spaghetti.
So we're going to look in our quadrats, and the data collector is going to collect any data that when we find our crabs. So we're going to practice leave no trace ethics, also putting the rockweed back in any rocks. Please don't move a rock bigger than your head. No, you guys are really strong. While you're looking too, kind of notice all the different species of rockweed here. We have a lot of different ones, which is pretty unique. We got some Irish moss, got different types of rockweed in through here as well, and on the rocks.
I don't see any more knobs. Isn't that a crab? I think we need the tweezers. Lilo, can I have the tweezers? No.
They're so small that I bet there's a bunch hiding in here.
Oh, wow. Crab. Is that a crab?
It won't bite you.
Perfect. Hey, the bucket. Guys,
let me get a picture. Someone, the crab handler, to also grab the caliper, so the red little ruler thing.
I'll grab it.
All right. So you guys got a lot of really cool crabs. So we're going to collect data on every single one of them. Hold this crab. Make it a little bit easier. Hold the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
So like that. And then he doesn't move as much. What do you think?
It's like 3.
What are we reading?
2 on the dot.
2 on the dot. So for science, we want to write a tenth of a decimal, right? So 2.00.
Okay. Is he a straight V?
Yeah,
yep.
that looks like a V.
So, male or female?
Male.
There you go.
Put 2. Hard number of claws. Yeah, there's 2. He's got both claws.
Oh, this guy's so cute.
Okay, alright.
It won't pinch you. All right.
Nick Fisicelli, president of the Schoodic Institute, says the green crab study is one of over 80 research projects happening in the park each year.
So we think science is for everyone, and everyone can contribute to science. And so the research here really about understanding the changes happening in Acadia.
Are these kids actually making a difference when they're looking for crabs?
These kids are making a difference, yes, absolutely. There's great examples that actually through some of these middle school classes helping us just pay attention to what's happening out here. They've found, for example, Asian shore crab here on the Schoodic Peninsula, and it was the first observation of that species. And so they play a really important role in the science in helping us pay attention to what's happening in Acadia and to how it's changing.
Remember, some of you didn't quite want to touch it because it was really slimy, which is okay.
After rummaging through the seaweed for crabs, students returned to campus to enter the data they collected.
Close-up of native crab spines. No, we don't have any natives.
The afternoon is devoted to learning about native trees.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Here, fast friends Francis and Annika identify a spruce using a scientific key.
Are they the brown?
Yeah, so it'll be a lot of the things we've done, like we've talked about in science class, but like you get to do it hands-on instead of like our teacher telling us what it is.
What do you think the benefit of that is? Doing things hands-on?
Maybe that you remember it better because you get to actually figure it out for yourself instead of like someone just telling you how it works.
The rangers are awesome. They are amazing. They are really kind and considerate. It's been enlightening and entertaining, and I have to say it's exciting. This is a whole new experience, yeah.
This one does not mind that one. So if you have to put the big one in there, these 2 small ones.
It seems like it'd be very rewarding to introduce children to the outdoors in this way.
It is what fuels a lot of my staff and myself to do what we do. I mean, there's a lot of long days and set up and break down, but when you're out there in the environment with kids and you see the light bulb go on and the energy, it's all worth it.
On the next episode of Borealis, we meet up with Wabanaki youth leader Niall Sockbeeson as he completes his epic journey of the Appalachian Trail. We'll learn why he did it and who inspired him. We also head to the Rangeley region, where we'll go on an adventure with a group of young people whose families recently arrived in Maine to seek asylum. As we say goodbye, we leave you in the skies over Moosehead, Maine's largest lake. Thank you for joining us for the first episode of Borealis. I hope you'll return next time.